but a partial list of some of the famous/interesting people Ben Gay III is known and worked with over the years. Do it: Napoleon Hill, Earl Nightingale, Norman Vincent Peale, Dr. Maxwell Maltz, Apollo 15, 16, and 17 astronauts.
And he said, Ben, you will worry less about what people think of you when you realize how infrequently they do. And Chanel that night at the Snooty Frog drove that home. I've been gone 6 years in a federal prison, and she thought I was mad at her and hadn't been in 2 or 3 weeks.
Jeff Stearns, connected through cars. If they're bigwigs, we'll have them on the show. And yes, we'll talk about cars and everything else. Here he is now, Jeff Stearns.
I love that poster behind you. I've been to the Concours d'Elegance many times. But as I've gotten older, the cars they're showing as beautiful antiques are cars that I owned at one time. I don't mean the really, really fancy ones. But, when I go to a 1936 whatever, my first new car was not new, but my first car was a 1936 Chevrolet. I don't need to see it in an antique show.
Right. And look how much better I aged than that car did.
Yeah, exactly.
Is what you're thinking. Okay. So Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars podcast. I'm here with a literal legend, Ben Gay III. And so the premise of this podcast, Ben and audience, is it's interesting people I'd met through the car business that I know a little. So I just want to be transparent. I don't want to act like a big shot that I know everybody. I have been reading Ben's book, The Closers, since the mid to late 80s, have lent out, God knows how many of them, have bought it over again. No, not that, yes, that one, but not that cover. The cover that's a little darker.
Back, huh?
Oh, see? Now I'm like one of those Concours d'Elegance antique. So a little darker than the color of my shirt, and it just said The Closers in almost a modernistic computer writing font or something, right? And I read that thing so often that I had the corner of the cover worn off and the pages thin. And then, of course, I'd get a fresh one when I would lend it to somebody. But I don't have the same closing ratio as you. If I recall, you have something like career 86% closing rate or some lie like that. But I was good. And a lot of people asked what I did. And I gave your book, I can't tell you, to how many of them. So if you don't mind, I just want to read a little bit about you. And we're going to have a normal conversation here, but there's so much about you. I mean, my God. But a partial list of some of the famous/interesting people Ben Gay III is known and worked with over the years. Most work with him either full-time or as mentors or in seminars. So the names that stand out for me is, just to be able to, as you being the conduit, Napoleon Hill, Earl Nightingale, Norman Vincent Peale, Dr. Maxwell Maltz. Another one of my favorite books, Mandino's, are so great. And I mean, there's plenty here, but there's also something interesting here. And I want you to save it though, because I have a little more stuff. I just want to brag on you a little, but I want to talk about, Apollo 15, 16, and 17 astronauts. Okay. So that's the list. Incredible. God, there's so, you've done so much. You're well preserved. We'll have to ask what you're doing for self-preservation there. But of course, the book, the Closer series and Sales Closing Power. Now, of course, this podcast is Jeff Stearns Connected Through Cars. My background is I was in retail car dealerships for 27 years, a manager for a little over 20 of those years, and now for about 9 years with chatlead.com, selling car and boat and RV chat to car dealers for their website. But I do an awful lot of consulting with them on the selling of the leads that our chat provides. So I'm talking to people about selling all day. So this is so darn appropriate having you here. Worked continuously as a commission salesperson since you were 14. All right, so big deal. So did I. All right, but I don't have the 86% closing rate. When you were 18, you were okay, this is impressive. Number one salesperson at Macy's in Atlanta. And then you became a buyer's there, the youngest one ever in their 100-year history. You were the number one salesperson in a large organization for manufacturers reps in a major food brokerage company, in largest network marketing company at the time, in a management consulting firm, in another direct sales company. Okay, this one is 4 pages. I mean, what I'm going to do for the watcher is I'm going to post this stuff in the notes. It's just too much, not boring. It's just too much for one guy. You're only one man, Ben. Truly a living legend. So, sales is my thing. I love taking it down to the granular. I love taking it down to the cellular. But my interest is really piqued with the astronaut thing. Can you talk about that?
When I was running Holiday Magic Cosmetics, which was the largest MLM direct sales company in the world at the time, one of our distributors, we used to call them holiday girls, like an Avon lady, was named Jeannie Harrington, and she was married to Jim Harrington, who happened to be the launch test supervisor of the manned space program. Goes all the way back to Vanguard, the Navy rockets that would go up about 3 feet and fall over. And I used to watch those as a kid on television. So Jeannie called me one day. I remember I was in Canada, and she said, "Would you like to come down and watch an Apollo launch?" And I said, "Absolutely." She said, "How much warning do you need?" I said, "You just gave it to me." When? And it was watching Apollo 14 take off. That was Alan Shepard's flight, and it followed 13, which had blown up, while circling the moon. So I was excited about going to it. A little tentative though, since we just had a bad experience. I didn't want to have another one that I was at. But she said, "Come on down." Well, to surprise me, that night at their house they had a barbecue. And the launch crews and the astronauts for Apollo 14, 15, and 16 were there. 15, 16, and 17 were there because they wanted to see 14 take off also. So I got thrown into the bunch in the middle of a bunch of astronauts, and it turned out Jim and Jean Harrington were excited to have the president of Holiday Magic Cosmetics at their house. The president of Holiday Magic was excited to meet astronauts. I did everything but bring my autograph book. So I was set up properly, and they wanted to hear what I had to say. So sitting around casually and wandering around, explaining, because they were all acutely aware that being an astronaut was not a lifetime occupation. It had an end date because of death, accidents, or just age. So they want to know, what do we do next? So it turned into sort of a motivational seminar and working seminar. Mainly we ate and had a good time, but I remember sitting in the living room with all these people gathered around me, and I thought, the wrong person is in the chair. I should be sitting on the floor looking at them. So somewhere during the evening, Jim Irwin, commander of Apollo 15, said, "Ben, if you don't mind, I am naming you our attitude coach." And the other astronauts all went, yeah. Now, like a lot of things, like teaching at San Quentin for 5 years, attitude coach didn't come with any cash. It is one of those honors that you can't turn down, but I couldn't ask for money for it. So I began working with the astronauts and the directors of NASA. Dr. Miles Ross and Dr. Davis at the time were the heads, and sharing some ideas with them. They were very open. I walked in their office, "Ben, what can we be doing better, etc." We set up a program over a few weeks' time where the 100 and so astronauts that didn't have a shot scheduled, they were, treading water. I said, "What do they do?" And they said, "Well, they train." I said, "Have they pretty much got it now?" And they said, "Well, yeah, most of them." I said, "Well, let's put them on the road and let America see what wonderful people they were," which by and large they were. Well, what would they talk about? And I said, and they'd also talked about NASA has never gotten as much as 2% of the budget. So we went to the moon and back and have done all sorts of amazing things on a shoestring, basically. And one of the reasons is the taxpayers, a lot of them were saying, why are we going to the moon? I hear it now with Mars. Why are we going to Mars? Well, it's, as Jim Rohn used to say, it's not important you become a millionaire. It's important what you become while you're becoming a millionaire. It's not important we go to Mars, except what you have to do to get there. Probably, if I went in your office right now, I could point out 15 or 20 things that would not exist if NASA hadn't needed them. And needed them needed them minutes. You have a heart attack, God forbid, when you're in the ambulance and the hospital is talking to him and they're beginning treatment while you're still parked in front of your house. That's NASA. That's where it came from. So I said, let's get these guys with a script. Oh, and I said, you haven't written down anywhere all the things that came from NASA? They came in with a thing that looked like the New York phone book. I said, has anybody ever seen this? Well, no. Well, why would they want to see it? I said, because they want to know where their money is going. From digital watches to miniaturized computers. I have a cell phone here who has the firepower, can't hold it the right way, has the firepower of any one of the consoles in mission control when a rocket goes off. And the personal computer I'm looking at has more firepower than the entire control room, for $1,200, whatever it costs, than the entire control room had when we sent 3 men to the moon and back. So it's amazing what they had to accomplish. We didn't have the huge rockets like the Russians had. Russians didn't have to miniaturize. We couldn't casually throw a 1-pound item on the ship. Every ounce had to be accounted for and therefore miniaturized. So we took the 100 or so astronauts, gave them scripts on all the things that NASA has done, encouraged wherever they went that the entire public be invited, but our cover story was they were going to go out and talk to the schools under the theory the students would go home and tell mom and dad, you won't believe what NASA's doing, and even better, have mom and dad come to the school. So we turned about 100 fighter jockeys back in those days. Pretty much you were a pilot first. Turned 100 fighter jockeys into public speakers and publicity agents for NASA. And that program still continues. If you see an astronaut come to your town to talk about NASA and all the wonderful things it's doing, they weren't doing that before the night before Apollo 14 took off.
Ben, did you personally work with these fellows on their public speaking?
Yes. Yeah. Those who felt they needed it. The fighter pilot mentality is such that a lot of them don't feel like they need anything. A friend of mine, Danny Cox, who was a fighter pilot and a famous speaker in the real estate business, he said, do you want to know how you're in a room with a fighter pilot? And I said, yeah, how do you tell? He said, he will tell you.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. He was aware of the ego quotient. So they wanted to get out there and do it, but they're into training. So they wanted to have it standardize what they said.
Thank you for that. So one of the people on the list was Napoleon Hill. And forgive me if I'm going all over the place. But sure. Napoleon Hill, I mean, my goodness. Ziglar, Norman Vincent Peale. How did you end up connecting with meeting one of them? I mean, for me, meeting you is a big deal in my life. For you to meet these people, was it centralized somehow? Were they all at the same place one day?
Funny you should mention them. Let me write them down and I'll hit them all in order. Dr. Hill, the day I joined Holiday Magic Cosmetics, the gentleman who recruited me said, you're young. I was 23. He said, you're going to have to get some wisdom gathered up pretty quick. And he gave me an old beat-up copy of Think and Grow Rich, so marked up and underlined and all, it was hard to read. It was his copy. And he gave me a record, which I still have about 15 feet from where I'm sitting, The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. And he said, read this, listen to this, and so on. 2 years later, I was president of the company to a large degree because of what those things taught me and what little training the company already had in place. So I'm sitting in my office one day, 25-year-old president of a company that in today's money was soon doing about $3.5 billion, and I couldn't balance my checkbook. I was in over my head, to say the least, but if you tap dance fast enough and you can speak and mesmerize crowds and make sales, they'll let you get away with a lot. But one day there was a knock on the door, and looked up, and there was William Penn Patrick, the owner of the company, one of my most important mentors. And he was standing next to this little old man who was leaning on a cane. And so, being a Southern gentleman, I hopped up and ran around my table and went over and I said, "Hi, I'm Ben Gay." And Bill said, "Ben, that's Dr. Napoleon Hill." And I said, "I'm so sorry. The pictures I've had seen were all younger, and they had that horrible collar that he used to wear. It looked like he escaped from a lynching." And
I know the picture you mean.
Yeah. So I said to Bill, "Well, it's such an honor to meet you, and to Dr. Hill and so on." And he said, "Well, I've got some good news for you. I've hired Dr. Hill to be your mentor." I'm not positive he said mentor, because we didn't use mentor and coach as much then as we do now. But what he really did was he gave him $50,000, a little over, almost $500,000 in today's money, to be my friend. Rodney Dangerfield, the old comedian, used to say that the family had to tie a pork chop around his neck so the family dog would play with him. Dr. Hill was motivated to be my friend with a $50,000 check. And he said, "Here's the deal, Ben. You can tell," he said, "I know there are times when you're afraid or concerned, but you don't want to make the long walk down the hallway and tell me you're afraid and concerned, because you're afraid it'll cost you your job. Dr. Hill is now your friend and confidant. You may tell him anything you want to tell him. It will never get back to me. That's part of the condition of the arrangement. So I want you to use him," and so on. So, well, being a suspicious person, I didn't really believe that, but I thought it was nice, So I tested rather quickly. I tested Dr. Hill. I told him that I was thinking about doing something with some other people in the company, and Bill Patrick wouldn't like it. I knew he wouldn't like it because something similar to the story I made up had been tried on him once, and he fired them all, scattered them to the far winds, and he called it the Last Supper when he called them all together. "Gentlemen, welcome to the Last Supper." And Bill would get mad telling me the story years later. So I knew if I made up a similar story, told Dr. Hill, and he went down the hallway and told Bill Patrick, I would hear the yelling from the back of the building. So I wrote a letter to him and sealed it, went to the art department, sealed it with that wax they put on official documents, and gave it to his secretary. And I said, "Marion, if you ever hear Bill screaming and using my name in vain, etc., I want you to get this letter out and give it to him." And then I told Dr. Hill a made-up story and a couple others early in the game, and waited for the explosion. It never came. When the company went out of business 3 years roughly after I left, to the best of my knowledge, that letter was still in Marion McGinnis's top drawer. Dr. Hill he was like a Catholic priest to me. He never criticized me or questioned me in front of other people. If there was a big meeting, when everybody left and I heard the door latch, I'd think, okay, if I've done anything stupid, now I'm going to hear it. But never in front of other people. The explosion from Bill Patrick never came. So I got where I could tell him literally anything, and did, and therefore got unfettered advice. It's hard to ask an advisor, what should you do if you don't tell the advisor the truth? So I gave myself the freedom to trust him. So he came to work for us the last 2.5 years of his life. At the end of the first year, he started hinting about it's about time to re-up or not, And so I said to Bill Patrick later that day, Dr. Hill is hinting that it's time for another $50,000. And Bill said, well, what are you going to do? And I realized this year it was on me. It wasn't a company expense. So I wrote him a personal check for $50,000, went down and said, Dr. Hill, I want to re-up. And we did. And I was talking to somebody the other day. I'm not positive that I paid him for the third year, which he didn't live through. Or maybe he was starting to get sick and there was no point in it. I don't really recall, but the company paid him $50,000 once. I paid him $50,000 once, and maybe I paid him another $50,000. Best money I ever spent.
Ben, but in today's dollars, you're talking about $500,000 equivalent.
Yeah.
And you personally, as the employee, well, forget about that. You may have forgotten, did I write the check the second time? But not only were you, when you're saying that it was the best $50,000 you ever spent and well worth it, but you were able. So that's, I mean, you were still a young.
I was able to write the check. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was making a lot of money when I left the field to come be president of the company. I won that in a contest. But Zig came in second, I'd like to point out. I wish he were still alive to hear it because it used to drive him crazy. I won the mystery prize. He won the Rolls Royce. Another gentleman won the Lincoln Continental. Another guy won a Thunderbird. And after that came steak knives. So when I flew to California to accept the mystery prize, I said to Bill Patrick, what is the mystery prize? And he said, presidency of the company. And I said, what if, somebody you didn't like had won it? He said, then I would have changed the prize. That's the reason it was the mystery prize. So at that point, I'm 25, Dr. Hill's 84, biologically was old enough to be my great-grandfather. And off we went. And you had asked earlier, how did I meet Zig? I met Zig Wednesday, September 15th, 1965 at noon in Bill Dempsey's office. And the reason I remember it is not that it was all that monumental. That was the day we both, and my business partner, Jimmy Rucker, all three of us answered the same ad in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It said, if you know anything about marketing plans and want to make more money, dial this number. I didn't know what a marketing plan was, but I qualified in the second sentence. I needed to make more money. So we went down, put up our $91.41, bought a one-pack box of cosmetics, and we started off. Zig was 18 years older. He was in the Navy the day I was born. So he got off to a little quicker start, and he was already an accomplished speaker, but he hadn't had a big hit yet. So Zig and I started making serious money, or got into a situation to make serious money on the same day in the same meeting.
Well, I don't want to make you feel too good on today's conversation, but you met Zig the same year I was born. So there you go.
Oh, swell.
Now you're the Hill. Okay. So, except I don't have the $500,000 to stroke the check to you. God, and let alone the second one, God forbid. What about Stone and Nightingale? I mean, these names, unbelievable.
Well, here's W. Clement. Earl was the voice of Holiday Magic. I hired him to do that. And having heard him on the radio and everything, I tracked him down and hired him to be the voice. So if we invited you to a meeting and the distributor wasn't good enough to invite you, you handed the prospect a record. He went home and listened to it if he didn't have one in your office, and Earl Nightingale invited you to the meeting. Then the meeting was totally scripted, plus a film. And the film said, turn to the person who brought you here and ask how you can get started. And after you went through the closes, all scripted, and joined, you were given, or let's say you were iffy, you were given another record by Earl Nightingale called Passport to Success, which in essence said join. And then if you did join, the next thing you wanted to do was become a general distributor, where that's because of where the money was made. And I had Earl do another one called The General Idea. And so Earl was the voice of the company. Cute story about Dr. Hill and Earl. I'm now president of the company few months have passed. I'm living in one of the biggest homes in Marin County, California. They come out to spend the weekend, and they stayed at the house, as they always did. Dr. Hill in time had his own room at our house, but they came out to stay at the house, and something came up, and I told them the story about being given a copy of Think and Grow Rich and a copy of The Strangest Secret. One of them, I don't remember who, I remember right where they were both sitting, but I don't remember who said it. One of them said, well, did they help? And I looked around. We're looking out over San Francisco Bay, surrounded by 156 acres of pasture land in one of the biggest houses in Marin County. And I'm 25, maybe 26 by then. And I looked around and I said, well, you're both working for me. And they laughed. Earl Nightingale had a booming laugh, if you could get him to laugh at all. They both laughed so hard. But they were flattered because you removed Think and Grow Rich and The Strangest Secret from that recruiting session. I'm not sure I would have been sitting where I was sitting.
Unbelievable. So I'm looking at the website, and I'll put the address on the show notes, thelastprotege.com. And you say, most people don't know, but during the last 3 years of Napoleon Hill's life, he mentored a man who went on to become a hugely successful business leader, Ben Gay. But, further down, you'll be able to join us as we discover how to really, in caps, emphasize, use the laws of success, originally compiled from more than 500 of the most successful business people. Of course, that was in the book. But when you say really in bold, this makes me wonder something about you, Ben. And this isn't, I have some notes about you and some people I want to ask you about and stuff, but it comes up for me now. I get into this debate with some people. I want to train anybody that's interested in selling or succeeding. I always want to train them, mentor them, help them out. And I believe that, for example, with your book and other ways, and self-management, management of your own state, making some decisions, taking in some education that you choose, that salespeople are not born. They can, if you want to do it, you can do it. And I hear sometimes, and you've probably heard this too, and I'm not trying to compare myself to you because I've never hit your numbers, but I've been a mentor, a coach, a boss. But that's you. I can't do what you do. And that makes me crazy because that negates all of, for example, reading your book over and over and over again, trying to absorb it. It means that, for example, the person at the driving range who hits 9 million buckets of balls, or the professional basketball player that throws 10,000 free throws, it was just some natural talent and not all that work that they put into it. But in your case, I kind of want to say, but I'm not you, which always bothers me when people say that to me. Because what you accomplished so young, and what you say about, as Albert Einstein said in the above quote, in theory and practice are the same, but in practice, they're not. You've got some unbelievable, inhuman, running a 3-minute mile accomplishments. Anyone in sales knows an 86% closing rate or a 50% closing rate or probably even a 40% closing rate lifetime is not realistic. Scientists said the human body can't run the 4-minute mile, right?
And now high school girls are doing it.
Only because the first person did it.
Yeah, because Roger
Right?
Bannister did it, and then I forget what his name was now. That's when you're second. It's easy to forget who you were. But Roger Bannister, et cetera, and they were studying him for weeks afterward to see if his heart would explode. And then I repeat, high school girls are doing it now. So a huge part of, training, all that stuff.
They believe it's possible, or their coach tells them that it's possible, but they're not being told with pragmatic scientific fact that it's impossible. But when you're talking about the laws of success from Napoleon Hill and on this site, thelastprotege.com, I mean, is this sort of like a mystic, staying in a cave for 3 years in solitary studying this stuff? I mean, are you getting it at a level that you feel like most people who just read the book and put it away aren't? Or do you feel like it's right in front of people's noses if they would just pay attention? Is it frustrating for you that they don't see it the way you see it?
Yes. Because, first of all, let's go through my credentials. I'm a high school graduate, barely. I lasted in college 3 weeks, just long enough to be elected president of the freshman class, but I wasn't there when they swore the president of the class in. I've always maintained the inauguration should be much closer to the election. To go through the election and then have the inauguration sometime further out than 3 weeks, I don't think is fair. And to get my high school diploma, I was thrown out of public school, and because my family had some money, I wasn't sent to reform school. I was sent to a private school, St. Andrew's Prep School up in the hills of Tennessee. That was an interesting experience I won't bore you with, but I don't recommend it. And then I got thrown out of there. Actually, I ran away, hitchhiked back to Atlanta, but because I did that, they threw me out. So I graduated from high school barely. My father said it must have been based on height. You get to 5'10", they give you a diploma, because it certainly wasn't based on achievement. Back to the talent thing, there are people who are born to be especially charming and gracious. Zig is one. Zig had to learn how to sell, and he was taught how to sell by J. Douglas Edwards. You alluded to his book. I wrote it for him after he died, Sales Closing Power, just because he didn't write a book. But I took it from my notes of what he said and his recordings. But Zig was trained technically by J. Douglas Edwards. He would have been the most popular guy in town without training, but he didn't start making serious money till he got trained and joined a company that could magnify his talents. I had zero talents, but here's one thing people say: how'd you become president of the United Freudian slip. I wanted to be president of the United States. How did you become president of Holiday Magic 2 years after you started? Well, it wasn't 2 years after I started. I started selling at age 10 when I won a red Columbia bicycle for selling more Krispy Kreme donuts than any kid in Atlanta. So that's sort of where I started. And I was selling Christmas cards and stuff before that. But that's the first time I worked and they gave me something for it, age 10. At 14, I started my own business because my father told me I wasn't going to be sitting around the house all summer long mowing lawns. And I don't like manual labor, didn't then, don't now. So I figured out a way with his help to go out and solicit and sell the jobs, and then to come back and inspect them, and then to split the money with whoever did the work. And the little trick there was, our pricing was, when we're done, you pay us what you think it's worth, which meant people paid us 2, 3, 4 times what I would have dared ask for. And so when I split that with a guy who did the work, he had more money than he would have had if he'd done solicited the job, and he wouldn't have solicited to start with. That's the breakdown. You got to go up and talk to a stranger. So in the growing season in Atlanta, I had 25 kids working for me. In the non-growing season, it would drop down to 7 or 8. But I was splitting money with 25 employees, having done the sales job and the collecting and the inspecting from 14 on. So by the time I got to president of Holiday Magic, and how impressive that is, I've been selling and winning things for 15 years. I'd owned my own business for 10, 11 years before that. And then I'd become the number one guy at Macy's and so on. So I didn't wander into Holiday Magic. Zig used to talk about the guy who gets to the top of Mount Everest. When they ask him, how'd you do it? He never says, well, I was out wandering around and I came to the top of this mountain. It doesn't work that way. And it didn't really work that way in my case. Some of the side places I took didn't fit into the overall plan, but rather quickly I'd get back on it. One of the people have asked me, to what do you attribute your success? Accident of zip code. This is a gentleman, Lamont Bowens, who is our adopted son, one of my 3 adopted sons. And I met him when he came to a public speaking class I was teaching in prison. He was a 19-year-old high school dropout. That's assuming he ever dropped in. I was never clear on that. but he didn't finish high school. He was a drug dealer. He was in a street gang. He'd been in a gunfight with his stepfather. Neither one of them were killed. But that was what, and his heroes had Cadillacs with long hoods and Rolls-Royce grills on the front. You know what I'm talking about? And they wore fur coats and had hats. That was his goal, to be the top drug dealer in the country, and it wound up, put him in federal prison for 5 years, which was good news, because if he'd stayed on the streets much longer, he'd have gotten a lot longer sentence or been dead.
Right, he probably saved his life, who knows?
Yeah, prison was probably a good thing for him. I, however, was raised 2 blocks outside the front gate of East Lake Country Club in Atlanta, Bobby Jones' home course, and the people that I knew and or caddied for or got to sit at the table with my father in the men's grill were the chairman of the board of Coca-Cola, the founders of Home Depot, the regional vice president of fill in the blank. Every major company in the country had at least a regional office, if not the home office in Atlanta. And my father was a successful salesman, always owned his own business. All of my aunts and uncles did, and so on. So I believe the goal was to be like these people. Successful, educated, gracious people. They had a lot of Cadillacs out in the parking lot. And I sort of grew up with that. Years later, I met Jim Newman, who had PACE seminars, and he coined the term comfort zone. So I can't claim I had it back then, but my comfort zone was set high. When I went out on my own, got married, and announced I was leaving home, my father said, "Super, I wish you the best, and if I can do anything for you, let me know. But the gravy train has ended. You're off on your own now." So I walked into our little 2-room apartment, not 2-bedroom, 2-room apartment in Atlanta. No kitchen, by the way. We cooked on a hot plate and washed dishes in the bathtub. And I had half of the bachelor furniture from my apartment with Jimmy Rucker. You can imagine what it all would have looked like. You can imagine what half of it looked like. And I walked in, looked around, and thought to myself, I don't belong here. Didn't know the term comfort zone, but this was not the life I was expecting or looking for. And within 2 weeks of that experience, September 15th, 1965, I answered the ad in the Atlanta Journal, having bought the paper to look for better jobs. And salespeople were not in the jobs department. They went in business opportunities. So you couldn't post the commissions there. So I looked from A to Z, if there was a Z, at all the things I could do for a salary. And Jeff, there wasn't a single item in the newspaper that I was qualified to do.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness. So I kept reading as I was getting ready to throw it in the trash, and I came to the section, business opportunities. And I'm guessing, I don't know the circulation back then, but let's say that newspaper went to 200,000 people that day. And that ad only ran one day. He ran other ads at different times, but that ad that caught my eye ran one day. So 200,000 people had an opportunity to read it and respond. 2 did, because I responded for Jimmy and me. 2 did, me and Zig Ziglar.
That's all the action they got from the ad?
Yeah. There were we thought, Zig and I and Jimmy, we thought we were going to a job interview.
Right, you didn't know you were going to leave there buying a box of stuff to go sell.
A box of cosmetics, yeah. I went into a payphone to answer the ad, a phone booth in a payphone. And I likened it to, and we dialed the number, we didn't punch it in. I likened it to a rocket launch. I dialed in Bill Dempsey's phone number, didn't know what was happening, but a rocket took off, shaped like a phone booth. And my life changed radically from noon on.
I love your point when you were in this apartment and you said, "I don't belong here," because I've had a hard time putting into words. Some people think, or I shouldn't say think, say to me, "Jeff, can you calm down? You're doing this thing and you're doing that, and you're doing that thing." And simplistically, I'm like, yeah, but I got bills.
Yeah. My wife likes when Little Richard was asked by Johnny Carson one night on the show, and Little Richard, dressed like a stolen car. He said, Little Richard, does your wife like the way you dress? He said, no, but she likes the way she eats.
That's right. But your point about I don't belong here, I think is the most concise way to word what motivates somebody when they are motivated. And, as it relates to comfort zones, I mean, it can go the other way too, because it has to do with your subconscious. So this is why the dieter puts the weight back on, I think, or the person ends up back in the abusive relationship or whatever, because I think subconsciously we all have this thing that we either inherited through circumstances or created because of our vision, or in your case, the way you were living before and the way you were living after, that I belong here or I don't belong here. And I think that we do things when we don't belong to improve our situation or to make them worse, back to where we belong. Do you agree with that?
Yes. A very dear friend of mine and I walked into the Fairmont Hotel, I believe it was, in San Francisco, some famous gaudy hotel. And they had never been in a hotel like that. As we walked in, it was a she stopped and looked around and said, I don't belong here. And I took her by the hand, walked over to a sofa and sat down, and we had about an hour conversation about it, because she was very talented but had not taken off. And that gave me the understanding of why she hadn't taken off. She didn't think she was entitled to. She didn't think she had earned or deserved the good things in life. Like Lamont Bowen, I know better. I've pulled him out of prisons. One of my friends who went on to become president of one of my companies, when I first went to work at San Quentin, he was on death row. Shouldn't have been, but he was on death row. Then he won his appeal and got it reduced to life without possibility of parole. Then won another appeal, got it reduced to life. And during this time, I was teaching at Bob Schuler's Crystal Cathedral in Garden Grove, California. The hour of power is how most people know it. And I would tell them every time I was down there about how People Builders at San Quentin was going, and they really hooked on to this one friend of mine, what he'd accomplished in prison from death row. And I said, his goal is to be standing here on this stage one day talking to you. So I go down, do another session, and they said, how's Joe Mack doing? I said, funny you should ask. I pasted off today before you came in, and I want you to now watch as Joe Mack takes the last 48 steps from death row to the altar of the Crystal Cathedral. Joe, come on up. And down the aisle he walked. So when people say to me, I've had an interesting background. When people say to me, well, blah, 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 but I got these problems. I say, let me tell you about problems. You can't spell the word. You don't have a clue what a problem is. What you need is training and some motivation, and you can do anything. We built Holiday Magic. We didn't have any PhDs. If we did, I didn't know it and didn't care. We didn't have any PhDs amongst our 1 million distributors around the world. All we want to know is, would you come early? Would you stay late? Would you work on weekends? And would you learn the script so you can effectively present the product? And if you could, and the marketing plan, and if you could, I could take anyone from zero or little or nothing to $500,000 a year in those days. Carlos Fong was one of the best waiters I've ever seen in action. He worked in Tiburon, California at a restaurant called The Dock. And he did the flaming shish kebabs like a bullfighter. And he was handsome. The women loved him. So he did the flaming shish kebabs at our table for the 100th time. And I said, Carlos, how much do you make doing this? And he gave me a figure. And I said, what if I could promise you, because I trust you, I'm not going to do it for you, but that you can make 10 times that amount if you come to work for me tomorrow morning. He said, I'm in. He'd seen all our people and knew they were doing well. Less than a year later, Carlos Fong was president of Holiday Magic Mexico, SA, they call it. I don't know what that stands for, but Holiday Magic SA, our operation in Mexico. And he was a multimillionaire. From a waiter in a restaurant, me, a high school barely graduate, from Lamont Bowen's high school dropout drug dealer. Oh, and by the way, Lamont, I didn't finish the punchline on that. Lamont got out, we got him his GED while he was there, got out, called me one day, and he said, would you mind if you wrote a letter of recommendation? I said, sure. What are you doing? He said, I'm trying to get in college. So I said, I promise you. Tell me where to send it. Then I said, all right, have a great day. He said, one other thing. Would you guarantee my student loans? All I need is your signature, and I'll be off and running if they let me in. I said, sure. He said, I want you to understand. He wasn't yet calling me dad like he does now. He said, I want you to understand you will never take a dime out of your pocket. If it kills me, you will never have to pay a dime. So fast forward 4 or 5 years, he calls one day, he said, Dad, I need a letter of recommendation. I said, what are we up to now? He said, I'm going to law school. And I said, fantastic. He said, and I do need a loan guarantee. I said, okay. So we guaranteed that loan. I've never had to pay a dime. I'm confident never will have to pay a dime. He's now a successful attorney with offices in 3 cities, East Coast, West Coast, and Texas, doing very well. And he called me less than a year ago, and he said, Dad, I need another letter of recommendation. And I said, how much is this one going to cost me? And he broke up and he said, like the others, nothing. This is a recommendation for a judgeship in a juvenile court. He'll still keep his law practice, but at nights he will be a judge. And I've always, every time I think about it, I smile. Can you imagine standing in front of Judge Bowens with your story of how you went astray, but it's all somebody else's fault, and you're talking to a guy who served 5 years in federal prison, worked his way through high school, college, and law school, is very successful now, has a book out that's doing well, has been doing well for a couple, 3 years. Tell him your tale of woe. I would like to fly to wherever the courtroom's going to be and just wait for that moment when Lamont, in his deep voice, says, young man, let me tell you about struggles. So, properly motivated, somebody puts you on the right path, you can do anything, almost anything. If you're going to climb Mount Everest, you don't wander around like Zig said, you hire a Sherpa, someone who's been down the road before. There's a gentleman who's climbed Mount Everest like 300 times. He's never in the headlines. He's a Sherpa. But minus him, you wind up being one of the 300 or 400 dead bodies on the side of Mount Everest.
Very interesting. A man who climbed Mount Everest 300 times never mentioned the Sherpa. Never thought about that.
He wouldn't be there without him.
This is such gold. This is such gold. I hope that we can get 5 listeners in our audience, but if not, I want you to know that this is gold to me. I'm enjoying every second of this with you, no doubt about it. Now, I want to backtrack a little bit. You've done a lot of public speaking. Pretty sure a lot.
Over 5,000 paid engagements, and probably another 5,000 to churches and prisons and so on.
God, I didn't even know that number. Oh, and by the way, I just wanted to throw out there, I may not be as impressive to you as this waiter. I haven't been able to audition to you doing my flaming shish kebab as many times for me to catch your eye. But I want you to know that and my boss might be watching this, but I'm willing to leave for 5 times what I make. It doesn't have to be
Okay.
10. So I want to be easy. Pray for you if you've got anything. Okay.
All right.
So on stage, anything interesting? I've done a little bit of public speaking, but my God, with 5,000 rounds behind you paid and another God knows how many thousand not paid, you've had to have some interesting things happen. And this shows about the stories. Anything worth talking about?
Oh, I've had a few interesting moments. Zig used to say, because starting out. I said, what do? He said, speak every time you get a chance. Well, I took him literally, and I was somewhere every day doing something. And Zig came to do the story. He said, Ben Gay would work a traffic accident. And I said, only if there were 2 or 3 people there.
That's right.
Yeah. I have my limits,
Certain circumstances.
Yeah. Early in my career, I cut me off anytime you want, because I could go on and on and on.
This is gold to me.
Early in my career, I'm on the way to Florida with Bill Dempsey, the guy who got us in the business, and Jimmy Rucker, and he told a funny story. Dempsey was a great storyteller, and I'm a great listener and laugher. I got laughing so hard I couldn't stop. Have you ever been in one of those situations, where you laugh and you're sick and out of breath, and then you catch your breath and start laughing again? Anyway, it was a story about a guy who was a newspaper carrier in Atlanta, and for some reason, I don't know how he found out it was true. For some reason, this guy had a reaction to a certain thing, and B, how Dempsey found out, I don't know. But he worked at 5 Points, which is a big intersection in Atlanta where the banks are and everything. And if you went by on foot or in a car and said, "Hey, Henry," he'd go, "Henry, Henry, Henry," and throw down his newspapers and stomp on them. And so if you're young and stupid, it's funny to have somebody do that. One day, Bill Dempsey is walking down the street with a guy named Richard Michaels, who was a big deal in holiday magic at the time. And here's Henry right in front of him on the sidewalk. So Dempsey walks on one side and guides Richard where they were split by this guy. They each walk on one side. Dempsey reaches around to Richard Michaels' side, taps the guy on the shoulder. He was facing the other way and says, "Hi, Henry." And he turns around with his stack of newspaper, hits Richard Michaels in the face, drops him to the sidewalk, and begins yelling, "Henry, Henry, Henry," and leaping up and down. For some reason, I found that amusing, and I started laughing. And then Rucker in the back seat starts laughing. So then I started laughing to the point I fell out of my seat, and I was curled up in the fetal position under the dashboard for much of the trip from Atlanta to, I think it was Jacksonville, Florida. And I arrived there worn out from laughing, go up to the room, get cleaned up, put on a suit that doesn't look like I've been on the floor of a Lincoln all afternoon, walk to the front of the room. This is the first time I had spoken to about, 500 people, I'm guessing, which was a big crowd. Every night in Atlanta, I was speaking to 100, 200, and so on. But 500 people looks a lot bigger than 200. I walk up to the front of the room, have a nice introduction, and they give me a warm round of applause, and I look in the back. Dempsey's standing in one corner, Rucker's moving towards the other, backing up, unrolling a piece of butcher paper about 3.5 feet tall and long enough to cover the back of the room, on which is written in huge letters, I don't know how they got it done, written with marker pen and all, "Henry, Henry, Henry." And I collapsed.
Oh
on
my God,
stage,
you couldn't take it.
I went right into the hysterical, can't control myself thing again. And by the time, and now I'm pointing at the back of the room to show people why I'm doing this, and Rucker and Dempsey are just standing there looking at me like he's lost his mind. What a shame. There's no sign of the sign. It's gone. And they come up to get me. Literally, they pick me up under the armpits and take me to the back of the room. Face down, I'm watching my toes drag along the carpet, shrieking. And I'm looking up at people as I pass them on the end of the tables, and I said, "Henry, Henry, Henry," like that would make sense to them. And they're all backing up, okay, Henry, Henry, whatever. So I'm dragged out, thrown in the lobby. I remember it was in a wicker chair, left to my own devices in a wicker chair in the lobby of this place. So that's one. One that's funny now, but wasn't at the time. I'm called by the Home Office. I was still a distributor in Atlanta to go up to New York to a big meeting. They were having 5,000 people in the grand ballroom of the Park Sheraton Hotel. That afternoon, the guy I was going to be working with called and asked if I wanted to go to lunch. His name was Ern Westmore. You're probably too young to know it, but the Westmores of Hollywood were the makeup people. They did the makeup. There was a Westmore brother. There were 5 brothers. There was a Westmore brother at the head of every major studio in Hollywood at the same time. And then Mr. Westmore Sr. was treated like a god. So I'm now going to have lunch or breakfast, whatever, with Ern Westmore. I called my mother, who used to watch him on the old Art Linkletter show, and I said, I'm having lunch, let's say, with Ern Westmore. And she said, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. Why is that so amazing? Because he's a television star and a big deal in Hollywood. She wouldn't believe me. So anyway, I go to lunch, and during lunch, he's popping pills out of a little jar like they were M&Ms. I later found out they were heart pills, nitroglycerin. And he's talking about how much he likes me. And he said, tonight, would you mind if I introduce you? It would be an honor. I said, an honor? I hope we can get it on film since my mother doesn't believe we're having lunch together. Sure. So he goes up and he does his thing. And he told me, I said, if you had to go, after I figured out those were probably heart pills, if you had to go, how do you want to go? And he said, I want to go on stage talking to women about, his catchphrase was, there isn't a woman in the world who through the arch of a brow and a bow of a lip cannot be made more beautiful. He said, I want to go talking about the love because I have a love for this. And I said, that's fascinating. So I go down when it's time to go on stage, look at 5,000 people, and I'm thinking, I think I'll just slip up and go back up to the room. The worst will happen is they won't be able to find me. Somebody else will come up. I got all this stuff justified in my mind. I was not ready to appear before 5,000 people. So I had one foot up on the 4-step riser going up to the stage, and I thought to myself, no, I'm going to go. And just as I thought that, they wheeled a spotlight around and put it on me because Ern had started into my introduction. Now, you can't slip out of a room with 5,000 people in it and a spotlight on you. So I stood there and he said, ladies and gentlemen, my newest friend, a man who I believe will become president of this company. Ladies and gentlemen, Benjamin Franklin Gay the third, and as the D came out of his mouth, he dropped dead on stage. And I don't mean fainted. There's a look when somebody faints. This is like he'd been shot with an elephant gun. Boom, down. So I got up and grabbed the microphone. I said, is there a doctor in the house? And a couple of guys came forward and started working on him. I said, somebody called whatever you called them in those days. It wasn't 911. And somebody did that, and an ambulance came, and they came in with a Stokes litter, the stretcher on wheels, and started working on him. And finally, they looked up and they said, sir, he's dead. And they loaded him in the Stokes litter and started across the stage to go down the steps and out the side door. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, this is the only thing I had lived. Ladies and gentlemen, I had lunch with Ern Westmore today. I asked him how he would like to go if he had to go, because I knew he had a heart problem. I just found out. And he said, on stage, talking to women about how they can become more beautiful, and I quoted his famous catch line. And it looks like he's achieved that. Let's give him one last standing ovation. And the management of the hotel told me that they could hear what was going on in the ballroom out in the lobby and up one floor, the roaring of the crowd. So the doors, I can still hear in my ears. The medics push their way through the doors, and I hear flap, flap. And then I think, oh, it's back to me again. Well, we had a script. It was a 47-minute word-for-word script plus a 15-minute film. Then the lights came up, and you started hopefully signing people up. So the only thing I had to go with, as they say in show business, I got nothing. I had nothing but the script. So I said, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ben Gay. I'm a general distributor with Holiday Magic, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's special meeting. I went on for the other 46 minutes, showed the film at the end said, turn to the person who brought you here and ask how you can get started. the lights come back up and the distributor's supposed to get out their legal pads and start circling. Our normal closing rate in a situation like that, figure the audience is half prospect, half distributor, was about 50% of the prospects would sign up. And that's with different closers of different closing ability, but we'd still get about 50%. That night, we got almost 90%. And it was the same meeting, word for word, so it wasn't my meeting. It was the emotion of the moment. Most people have never seen a person die and so on. So when I'm asked how to be effective in group presentations when you're selling something, I say, here's what you do. Get a very famous person to introduce you and drop dead on stage. I'm telling you, it never gets any better than that.
So after that, did you hire shills to join you with the rest of the...
Yeah, to come in and fake death? Never got that bad. But things like that, just funny and sad things that 40, 50 years later become funny. I've had dozens of... We had a movie projector and a screen to show the Holiday Magic film. The screen was enormous. I'd never seen a screen, on 3 legs that big. And we had just run the film and all. And I go up to say something with a screen behind me, hadn't given any thought, and I'm looking at the front row, and their faces are all... And I'm thinking, I didn't say anything that bad. And then it hit me, literally. The screen came down on me, and I went up through the middle of it in my custom-made, tailor-made black suit. And you remember those screens? They had that glitter all over it. I look like Frosty the Snowman.
I didn't know the stuff came off the screens. Okay, now I know.
Oh, it comes off the screen. Yeah, it does. Under the right circumstances, it comes off. Hollywood Palladium. We rented the whole Palladium for 30 days and did 2 meetings a day there for 30 days on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. First time I go on stage, I had my briefcase with me. For some reason, I guess I was going to get something out of it. Oh, I know I was. And I'm doing questions and answers, and somebody asked me something. And in my mohair suit, custom tailor-made suit, I go over to open my briefcase to answer whatever the question was, and it was on the floor. So I knelt down in front of, 3,000 or 4,000 people. My pants in both legs split from the cuff to my underwear.
Oh my God.
And, now what do? You either off stage in either direction was 50 feet, and you can't do that backed up to the audience. So I could go on and on and on and on with funny things and things that people...
What about any bad moments? I know the guy dying at that time was bad, but it turned into a good story. But anything bad stayed bad?
Yeah, I've gone up on my lines a few times, show business term for you forgot what you're supposed to be saying, even though most of it was scripted, where I just didn't know anything. But if that's happened to me 5 times, I was saved each of the 5 times by Wade Cannon, one of my early mentors. I used to be vice president of Wilson Learning Corporation, Larry Wilson's company. He got up in front of a room one day and was telling about the qualities they should have. And he said, here's 5 qualities you should have. And he listed 4, and then he would get to the 5th one, and he couldn't remember it. And he would pause and look around and say, oh, this is embarrassing. And then he would look up and say, oh, the 5th one is what you're feeling right now, empathy. So I wasn't doing that trick, but when I went up on my lines, I said, after some point of realizing it wasn't going to come back, I said, what I also want you to learn that's important in selling is what you're feeling right now. You have to learn empathy. And people go, wow, that was fantastic. The truth is, I didn't know what I was going to say next.
That's fabulous. Now you're a pretty good storyteller. Is that like inherited?
I'm a Southerner.
You're probably
from the South.
You might be the best storyteller in the world with that closing rate. I guess you can't. Stories sell, right?
Yeah, I talk with word pictures because people can understand. If they can see it in Technicolor, they got it. If they have to decipher your words, they may or may not get it. Zig was not a great salesperson. Closed a lot of sales, don't misunderstand me. But he wasn't I say this and they say this and I say this and so on. He would teach that from the stage, but it wasn't what he did. Zig told stories and made you love him. And when he asked you for your money, you gave it to him because you loved him and trusted him because he was a storyteller. I was telling a story about Zig the other day. When I first started and realized he was by far a better speaker, I was still terrified. He was up wowing them, I used to follow him around. I shadowed him. He told the story, Biscuits, Fleas, and Pump Handles were his three famous stories. And pump handles, he had one of those old farm pumps for getting water out of the well that he carried in as a prop. Well, to be with him, I carried the pump. In fact, to the point, I said to him, Zig, don't they make these things in aluminum? Because this was a real steel one off of somebody's farm. He said, well, I'll look into it. And 2 or 3 meetings later, sure enough, we had a shiny, silver-looking aluminum pump. I said, all right, I'll carry it with you for a little while longer then. So I heard his story. Go ahead.
No, Ben, I'm going to have to put pictures on this video up in the corner because you've talked about a payphone. We're going to have to explain to some young people what that is, a rotary.
Yeah, what it is.
A rotary phone, a pump handle, right? I mean, my kids say, why do you say dial 7,
Or even hang up. Why do you hang up? They don't hang up anymore. They use their thumb.
That's a hang up, right.
Yeah, which has taken all the impact out of slamming down the phone.
Right, you just break your screen now.
Yeah.
Doesn't teach anyone a lesson. Of course, do you have brothers or sisters?
One sister, 7 years younger, the bane of my existence. We've had a wonderful kidding relationship, but she has a weirder sense of humor than I do, which is going some.
Well, then, all right, then you didn't use phones for what my little brother and I did. I mean, those were terrific weapons. There was no way you were going to nail your sister, 7-year younger sister, with the telephone receiver, whatever it was called. But I mean, those things back then, you could just about kill somebody with them.
Yeah, the old black ones were heavy. I got my sister on phone one day. I was in Detroit giving a seminar, called back to Atlanta to talk to my mom and dad. They were out for the evening. My sister was there by herself. I'm guessing she was 17, 18 something. And we have a thing in our family where when we're through talking, we don't say goodbye. We just hang up on the other person. It's a running joke. So Jane hung up on me. I hung up on Jane. Then she called back and we talked for a minute. She hung up on me. Then I called back and she wouldn't answer the phone. But I knew she was home alone. So I did what any rational son would do, brother. I called the DeKalb County Police in Atlanta. And I said, I don't want to stir you up and over nothing, but I'm very concerned. I was talking to my sister. I know she's home alone. I know she was undressing to take a bath when I called. And the phone went dead. And now it won't answer. Is there anything you could do? They said, we'll send a unit out immediately. So mom and dad pull in just as the SWAT team pulls up in front of they had a condominium by that time. SWAT team pulls up, or whatever they called it in those days, and forces their way in through the glass sliding door, followed by mom and dad. And Jane is sitting in the bathtub, looks up, and there's 4 or 5 deputy sheriffs and mom and dad saying, are you okay? And Jane said, why wouldn't I be okay? So, well, your brother called from out of town and said you wouldn't answer the phone. And mom and dad, telling the story, said they walked away, didn't want to rat out Jane and me, but walked away shaking their heads because they knew instantly what had happened. But they had to fill out police reports and all sorts of things. And I might add, it was the last time Jane has ever hung up on me.
Now, Ben, when we're talking, you're like a walking promotion. You've got your embroidery on your shirt, You've got your books handy. Are you working? Like, what are you doing? Are you still I mean, you're obviously still promoting yourself, and I'm so grateful that you agreed to join me on the show. I mean, I'm just enjoying you. Unbelievable. And I want to tell the audience that, like I said in the beginning, I was really nervous intimidated about having you on. And I've had some interesting people on, and I sold Rolls and Bentley for 10 or 15 years. So I thought I met everybody or could be cool in any situation. But anyway, I'm enjoying every minute with you. But are you like officially working? Are you speaking? Are you just selling books? Like, what's going on? Why, what's happening with you?
Well, when the speaking business dried up because you couldn't get on a plane or incentivizing when to come to a room, I do just 24 a year, but they're 95, which is a negotiation I made with Gigi when we got married. She knew both of my former wives, was raised with one and a very good friend of the first one who died. And so when I asked her to marry me and told her I was in love and all, she said, okay, I love you, and I was hoping you'd ask, and I'm ready to go pick out rings. However, I do know your two previous wives. And I said, yeah, but I've been very open with you. They can't spring anything on you. And she said, no, what they sprung on me was you do over 300 speeches a year, and you're hardly ever home. I can be lonely by my own self. So we must discuss how many times. And then I've heard in Marin County that you couldn't go into a restaurant because you had 5 major companies there, the cosmetic company, a motor oil additive company, a vitamin company, and so on, that distributors were always in town. So you never got through a meal without somebody, pulling up a chair and going, hi, we won the contest in Columbus, Ohio. We're out here for a week. You mind if me and the missus sit here with you? She says, I don't want to live like that. So I would like for you to just be Ben Gay that nobody knows, and then you and I. So we negotiated it down to 24 a year, no more than 3 in any one month, no local clients. If you've ever been to Placerville, California, you'll understand that really wasn't a great loss, and no speeches within 50 miles of home. And I said, how far is it to Lake Tahoe? Because I do a lot of stuff up there. She said 60 miles. I said, good. I can go with all of those. So when the speaking business shut down, there's 24 times 9,500 plus book sales that went away. So the income is down somewhat, but not much. I've taken on more coaching clients than I normally would. I don't have a numeric limit on them, but I can tell when I don't have any more time. So with the traveling gone temporarily, I've taken on more coaching clients. I've written 24 books, but 12 of them were ghostwritten. I ghost wrote them. So I've ghostwritten 2 or 3 books since the shutdown. I do a lot of direct mail. Direct mail to me means, on the internet or in the mail or whatever, but sales.
Now wait a minute, Ben. You wrote or ghost wrote 24 books in the last year?
Oh, no. I've written 24. 12 of them were ghostwritten. 3 of them, which I probably wouldn't have done, were done in the last year.
Oh, you did 3, which is still a feat during the shutdown. Okay, got it.
Yeah,
right.
Especially
3
since
books
I hate
is
writing.
Plenty to do in a year.
Yeah, it is. Most people haven't read 3 books, never mind written 3 or whatever. So, I've just taken, and I still teach and sell. If you and I weren't on the phone and a call came into the control room, if I'm here, I'm always first in the rotation. I take the first call and I answer it. Thank you for calling. How may I help you? I don't say this is Ben Gay, because then that elongates the conversation frequently. And if they're asked for Ben Gay, then Bob Talbert, who is my alter ego, finds out why they're calling, because the odds are there's someone else on the team that would better serve their needs. So, but a lot of people have bought from me directly and didn't know it. I sold yesterday afternoon 2 parcels of land in Arizona, an acre apiece, to people who've never seen the land, probably never will see the land. It's the type of thing you buy for retirement, but frequently don't retire to it. And so you put it in your will for your children or grandchildren. It sold 2 lots.
Is this property that you own, or are you also a realtor?
Yeah, I'm not a realtor, and that particular thing doesn't require a real estate license. When you go to sign up and all the paperwork sent to you, that comes from a realtor who fills it out. No, they called me one day and wanted to know if I knew how to sell land. I said, sure, I've sold lots of land, because the subject matter was write something. And they said, well, what we do is write, and there's a sales lesson here coming, Jeff. What we do is we run a 1-inch ad in classified papers all over the country. But we're not selling much. He said, can you write a 1-inch ad that will sell 1-acre plots in Arizona? And I said, no, don't know how to do that. They said, well, I was told you could sell anything. I said, I won't, but I could, probably is true. But your problem is what you're asking for is virtually impossible. But what I can do is I can write a 1-inch ad that will get people to dial your 800 number. You do have an 800 number, don't you? No, we just run our regular number. I said, no, you'll run an 800 number or I won't do it. I'm the one who started the 800 call center industry. I know the power of an 800 number, and now websites, of course. So I said, I can write a 1-inch ad that will get them to dial an 800 number. There they will hear a recording, and the ad will say it's a recording, so we don't scare them off. There they will hear a recording of a script that I will write, and I wound up narrating it for them. And that script will get them to leave their name, address, phone number, website, whatever, email. And then I will write a sales letter that goes out with your literature and all, and there and only then will I sell the land. And the answer is yes, I can sell a lot of land if we do that. Here's the sales lesson, Jeff. You always got to know what you're selling at each step along the way. Step 1, I was selling them on dialing a number to hear a recording.
Make the call, right.
Yeah, that's a successful sale.
That's the sale. That's the only sale at that moment.
At that moment, right. And then when they listened to the recording, the sale was, give me your name, address, and phone number, email, etc. And if they did, that was a sale. And then we sent them the package, and they read it, and it encouraged them to buy now. And if they called or emailed to buy now, that was a sale. And then they bought. So yeah, I can write a 1-inch ad that will result in a sale, but it's 4 sales or 4 steps later.
Makes perfect sense. And it's funny because people worry about the sale that they're not on, the sales step that they're not on often, I think.
They often don't know what the sales step is, but you're also talking about like a golfer, a world-class golfer is not bothered by the shot he hit last, good or bad, and he's not worried about the shot he's going to hit after he hits this one. He's worried about this one only, to the exclusion of all other golf shots in his career. If you can focus in like that, you do well in any business or any industry.
Can I ask you something about I don't want to be like too much of a groupie, but about the book. But I would carry your bags anywhere. So in the first book, you talk about master closer. And then in the next book, you talk about sales infiltration. Can you explain a little about that?
Sure. In the closers part 1, and we'll tell them how they can get it if they're interested. In the closers part 1, we teach the kicks, the blocks, and the punches of selling. He said this, you said this, he said that, here's his objection, here's how you overcome that objection, etc.
The 3 devil close?
Yeah, the 3 devil close.
I never forgot, that's all. Go ahead, I'm sorry. 25 years later, I still remember that.
The selling the way it really is, not the way we wish it was. Then enough people said to me, but Ben, that isn't really the way you sell. They sort of caught me doing what Zig did. Zig said, say this, they'll say this, you say this, but that isn't what he did. So they said, write another book that picks up where that leaves off. That's crucial. They got to have that. It's like kindergarten through senior year in high school. and then show them what you really do. The way so therefore I wrote The Closers Part 2. This is what sophisticated people really do with the information in Part 1. And in the last chapter of The Closers Part 2, starts on page 257, is what you're referring to, sales infiltration. That is, in my humble opinion, the best thing ever written about selling. When you were young, your family gave you a puzzle box to put together. Unless they were really cruel, on the cover of the box it came in was a color picture of what the puzzle was supposed to look like when you got done, so you had some reference points. Well, The Closers Part 2 does that. It's the color picture on the puzzle box. And when you start putting things in and start doing things, you go, oh, I see now why they told me that in Closers Part 1. This goes here, this goes here, this goes here. And then in Sales Infiltration, starts on page 257, goes to the end of the book. I show you what master closers and sales infiltrators, which is a step above master closers, what they're really doing. Jimmy Rucker, my high school running buddy, who knew, turned out to be the greatest salesman I ever personally worked with. Zig and I and a lot of other people weren't qualified to carry his briefcase. But he was a very bad sales trainer. Why? Because he didn't know what he did. He was just Jimmy Rucker. He got the little dimples, had the curly hair. Most of it's gone now. Had the curly hair. And people just loved Jimmy Rucker. Quick Jimmy Rucker story. So Sales Infiltration, when I wrote that, it was inspired writing. I wrote it in one sitting on filled up a whole legal pad. I didn't go to the bathroom. I didn't look up. I suddenly got it. I knew what Jimmy Rucker was doing, and I wrote that down. Here's what you can do if you're Jimmy Rucker. I don't encourage it for Jimmy. I don't encourage it for anybody. We're at a meeting one day recruiting people into something. I forget what it was. And the guy said, sitting across those long folding tables in hotels with a green tablecloth, guy said, I'm in, but I forgot to bring my checkbook with me. Well, this is in the days when if you left the house, you had your checkbook because we didn't all have a pocket full of credit cards and so on. And Jimmy stands up, leans over the table as he says, oh, of course you did. And he reaches into his coat pocket, where that inner vest pocket is, and pulls out his checkbook. Yeah, pulls out his checkbook. He says, here it is. The guy said, I forgot I had it. I maintain, Jeff, that if you or I did that, we get punched in the face. The guy wrote Jimmy Rucker a check for $5,000.
Well, Ben, I could send you a video from someone else I had on the show, which used to be one of the guys that worked for me at the exotic car dealership, the Rolls, Bentley, Ferrari, whatever. And I actually forgot the story. So when I invited him to be on the show, it's like, we worked together. We dealt with, all I wanted was some customer stories, some interesting customer stories. And I didn't know that he had one about me. So I might have a little of this in me. A fellow said he was going to take a car, and I said, terrific. And he didn't say he left his checkbook, but I don't have my wallet, or I don't have whatever, right? I can't leave you a deposit right now. And I said, by the way, that is a really nice looking timepiece. And he goes, yeah, that's a Hublot. Gosh, it set me back a little over $50,000. And I said, that'll do. And I undid it and slid it off of his wrist. And Clay, the fella that I had on the show, tells the story. Dead honest, I forgot. I mean, I remember it after he told, but it was one of those things like the golfer you mentioned. You forget what you do after, you forget what you do, what you don't think about what you're going to do next. It's only what's going on now, and you do it. So I don't want to compare myself to that guy, but I did have a similar story to the checkbook.
Oh, that's great. If Rucker and I were, I'm not a watch guy, so for instance.
But you would have to be a watch guy if you're selling these cars.
Oh, sure.
Because you've got to look at the shoes and the watch to know if you want the person to test drive it or not. Right.
Absolutely agree. But to give you an example, my watch band broke the other day. and we were in Walmart. So I bought this watch for $8.88.
We need to get you in a speaking gig quick.
So if you'll take that as a down payment on a Bentley, I'm in.
Absolutely. We'll hold it. Absolutely. Ben, I want you to know that I have enjoyed you today. I mean, the thing that I love about this show, speaking for me, but I've gotten a lot of positive feedback and, of course, a lot of constructive advice that we've changed a lot of things, is that I feel like I'm at dinner with the person. And, you know, that's what I really want for the audience. I really want the best experience. I mean, what's great for me is I'm creating a product hoping that someone else out there will really get something out of it and enjoy it. And I want, you know, it needs to be a win for everybody. The person in the audience getting something wonderful. You get, to promote, show your books, terrific. And at the moment, short term, I just get to enjoy every minute. God willing, I get to my 4,000 hours a month of someone watching YouTube. I can get paid for a commercial. I'm at 100 hours now, so we're going to get there. I should ask you later if you could help me with a 1-inch ad that can get me my 4,000 hours.
Yeah, probably can.
Then we'll stop recording in a minute, and you could give me. I'll take your advice.
This has been Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars.